will. I will.
Обе трансляции запущены, я отключаю звук.
Хорошо. Okay, so here we go. Добрый день, дорогие участники конференции, дорогие спикеры. Мы очень рады приветствовать вас на сегодняшнем мероприятии. Как вы знаете, сегодня у нас проходит конференция проекта развития поставщиков в Казахстане. И в рамках данного мероприятия мы сегодня будем обсуждать преимущества проекта развития поставщиков в Казахстане, вызовы постпандемического периода и влияние текущей ситуации на развитие малого и среднего бизнеса как в Казахстане, так и в других частях мира. Для открытия сегодняшней конференции я бы хотел пригласить директора проекта Никоса Янулидиса, который представляет компанию Евроконсультанты. Никос, прошу вас.
Thank you very much, Georgie. Dear participants of the conference of the Supplier Development Project in Kazakhstan, on behalf of the project contractor Euroconsultants, I would like to greet you and thank you for your participation in our conference. The attendance of such a large audience is very important and it reflects the importance of the project. I'm Nikos Yannulidis, Director of the Supplier Development Project. Euroconsultants is an international group of companies based in Greece providing high-quality technical assistance services tackling sustainable economic development. We provide support to ministries, governmental agencies, large enterprises, and small and medium-sized companies focusing on international competitiveness and innovation. The Supply Development Project is an innovative approach to supporting the international competitiveness of Kazakhstani small and medium-sized companies, with a particular emphasis to the key national economy sectors of oil and gas, mining, and metallurgy. Over the past 2 years of the Supply Development Project implementation, we have mobilized a large number of highly experienced international and local experts, and we have deployed an unprecedented number of activities in all regions of Kazakhstan, despite the difficulties imposed by the global COVID pandemic. The project impact is very significant, and it will be detailed in the next sessions of this conference. The project benefited significantly by the support of the Ministry of National Economy of Kazakhstan, the World Bank, the project beneficiary Kazindustry, the multinational companies participating in the project, and of course, the more than 200 SMEs that were the key focus of our activities. We're very excited to have the opportunity to present you the results of our project in support of the development of SMEs in the Republic of Kazakhstan. We think that in troubled and challenging times like this, it is important to look to the future and propose recommendations for the sustainable development of business in Kazakhstan. Today's conference has a twin focus. The first session will focus on the opportunities and challenges of SMEs worldwide and in Kazakhstan during COVID, while the second session will present the key results and achievements of the Service 5 project in Kazakhstan. I'm sure you will find both sessions equally interesting. We would like to thank you once more for your participation in the conference and urge you to learn more and become engaged. Thank you very much.
Спасибо, Никос. Благодарим.
Георгий, здравствуйте.
Да, здравствуйте.
Это Асет Бежанцев, Всемирного банка. У Тани, к сожалению, у руководителя проекта технические неполадки, и она попросила выступить от ее имени.
Да, будьте добры, я
да, привет. Ага. Ну, добрый день, уважаемые коллеги, дамы и господа. У кого-то эхо там стоит и...
У Татьяны пошло эхо, я выключил. Продолжайте, пожалуйста.
Ну, как команда Всемирного банка, мы хотели бы поблагодарить за интерес и участие в данном мероприятии всех представителей госорганов, частного сектора и других заинтересованных сторон, которые сегодня собрались здесь. В 2015 году мы начали работу над совместным проектом, который называется «Конкурентоспособность малых и средних предприятий в Казахстане». И этот проект оказывает поддержку казахстанским МСБ по ряду направлений, включая программу по развитию местных поставщиков. При разработке проекта мы думали о том, как улучшить рыночные связи МСБ с глобальными цепочками поставок, с крупными компаниями, помочь им с улучшением их компетенций, бизнес-процессов, а также с доступом к финансированию. Программа развития поставщиков была как раз вот таким вот инструментом, который мог бы дать толчок небольшим фирмам для развития продуктивности и конкурентоспособности за счет сотрудничества с крупными компаниями, и в частности в нефтегазовых, горнорудных секторах. С одной стороны, программа должна помочь определить нужды крупных компаний, работающих в Казахстане, а с другой стороны, помочь МСБ улучшить их компетенции так, чтобы они могли соответствовать требованиям крупного бизнеса по качеству и по надежности их товаров и услуг. Участвующие в данной программе компании МСБ достигают мировых стандартов качества и приобретают соответствующую сертификацию, чтобы стать поставщиками для крупного бизнеса. И не только внутри страны, но и по мере возможности, по мере того, как они становятся более конкурентоспособными, в том числе и для экспорта. В данной перспективе эти МСБ тоже должны создавать условия для улучшения и другим местным фирмам. И так по цепочке будут идти улучшения, да, получается. Развитие своих поставщиков очень выгодно и крупному бизнесу, так как она может вывести компании на новый уровень конкурентоспособности, создавать новые продукты и улучшать процессы. Нам во Всемирном банке и коллегам в Министерстве национальной экономики повезло найти замечательную команду единомышленников в Казахстанском центре индустрии и экспорта при Министерстве индустрии и инфраструктурного развития. И совместно с привлеченными консультантами мирового уровня компании Евроконсалтинс они провели огромную работу, отбирали МСБ на основе независимого процесса, ездили по всей стране для проведения обзора работы участвующих фирм, проводили тренинги с участниками, отдельно работали с крупными компаниями, чтобы тоже привлечь их к участию в данной программе. Но, к сожалению, пандемия внесла свои ограничения в реализацию планов, но коллеги все-таки смогли подстроить работу под сегодняшние реалии. И теперь наша главная задача, чтобы работа офиса по развитию поставщиков продолжала набирать обороты, увеличивая связи казахстанских МСБ с другими секторами экономики. Ну и, наконец, мы хотели бы отметить и работу самих участников, как МСБ, так и потенциальных байеров. Прошедший год был очень тяжелым для нас. И то, что вы продолжали работать в данном направлении, выделяли и без того ограниченные ресурсы, показывает вашу дальнозоркость. Самая важная часть работы еще впереди. Перед всеми нами стоит задача минимизировать последствия пандемии, обеспечить рост и качество рабочих мест и повышение общего благосостояния всех жителей Казахстана. Позвольте еще раз поблагодарить от имени команды Всемирного банка, от имени руководителя проекта Татьяны Сигал, всех участников за участие и внимание. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое, Асет. Спасибо за презентацию. Мы сожалеем, что существует техническая проблема у Татьяны, но еще раз благодарим вас за вашу презентацию. Сейчас я бы хотел попросить представителей Министерства индустрии и развития рассказать нам о некоторых положениях и ситуации, которые возникнут впоследствии вступления Казахстана в ВТО, и как это может отразиться на местных компаниях в Казахстане. Айжан, просим вас.
Уважаемые коллеги, рада приветствовать вас на данной конференции. Позвольте представить вам доклад по вопросам развития местного содержания. По условиям вступления Казахстана в ВТО была предусмотрена в период переходного периода, была предусмотрена поэтапное снижение преференций для предприятий. В рамках государственных закупок у нас были отменены требования по местному содержанию. Сейчас в сфере недропользования с 1 января 2021 года отменяются обязательства по товарам, а по работам и услугам обязательства снижаются до 50% в контрактах-обязательствах. То есть Казахстан теперь не может внедрять новые меры поддержки производителей, в связи возникают проблемы по продвижению отечественной продукции. В целях поддержки отечественных производителей и повышения доли местного содержания проводится соответствующая работа. Это в рамках договора о Евразийском экономическом союзе. У нас установлен приоритет закупок на 2 года для отечественных производителей легковых автомобилей, электрического оборудования, чулочно-носочных изделий, обуви, офисной мебели, а также цемента, при осуществлении государственных закупок путем установления изъятий из национального режима. Данный перечень расширяется, прорабатываются вопросы установления изъятий по лифтовым нефтегазовым оборудованию, счетчиков, трансформаторов и так далее. В целях развития нефтегазового машиностроения между Министерствами индустрии и инфраструктурного развития, а также Министерством энергетики и нефтегазовыми операторами подписано соглашение о намерении создания Международного центра развития нефтегазового машиностроения в целях проработки, выработки предложений по развитию местного содержания, а также поддержки отечественных производителей. У нас создана рабочая группа, в рамках которого участвуют заинтересованные государственные органы, Национальная палата Атамикен, Самрuk-Казна и другие отраслевые ассоциации. Проводятся соответствующие заседания. В рамках данной рабочей группы обсуждаются предложения, это как ребрендинг термина местного содержания, проработка заключения соглашений, добровольных соглашений с недропользователями по стимулированию предпринимательства, по применению национальных стандартов для урегулирования вопросов местного содержания и так далее. То есть работа в данном направлении у нас продолжается по развитию местного содержания. У нас данный вопрос будет всегда для Казахстана актуальным, и соответствующие меры будут приниматься. Спасибо за внимание.
Спасибо, Айжан. Я бы хотел еще раз напомнить нашим спикерам, что говорить лучше в русский канал, чтобы был перевод для наших англоязычных участников и слушателей. Сейчас в свете всего сказанного я бы хотел передать слово профессору экономики, научному руководителю компании ERC Жаксыбеку Абдрахметовичу Куликееву. Жаксыбек Абдрахметович, просим вас.
Спасибо, Георгий. Мне очень приятно видеть вас всех, уважаемые коллеги, товарищи. Я очень коротко хотел бы рассказать вам, с чем столкнулась экономика Казахстана в прошлом году.
Потом сразу отжимай на славку. То есть серии делать. Правой рукой, левой рукой и отжимай на славку.
Это кто-то...
Отжимание на лавке. Корпус надо поближе, да?
Извиняемся, Жаксыбек Абдрахметович.
Такое бывает, мы к этому уже давно привыкли. Тем не менее, что я хотел бы сказать, в своей презентации я хотел бы очень коротко рассказать об итогах функционирования нашей экономики в прошлом году, с какими сложностями казахстанская экономика, так же как многие страны мира, столкнулась из-за коронавируса, и чего мы ожидаем от текущего года. Первый слайд, пожалуйста, покажите. здесь короткая информация, которая показывает хронологию введения в Казахстане различных ограничивающих мер в связи с появлением, возникновением разных очагов коронавируса в Казахстане. Впервые этот вирус в Казахстане зафиксировали 13 марта прошлого года, и 16 марта мы в стране объявили первый локдаун. К этому периоду страна была готова, ресурсы необходимые были мобилизованы, и общественность, но за годы нашей независимости мы впервые столкнулись с такой проблемой, но тем не менее в стране была организована эта работа неплохо. Но отменили первый этап 11 мая. К тому времени число инфицированных в Казахстане было немного, поэтому общественность это несерьезно воспринимала эту болезнь. Но к началу июля мы столкнулись с всплеском коронавируса, смертных случаев стало больше. В связи с этим в Казахстане ввели повторный локдаун, и общественность испугалась. Ну, надо сказать, что и по сей день в Казахстане продолжаются разные меры, направленные на преодоление данной болезни. Кое-где в разных секторах экономики, разных отраслях экономики по-прежнему существует ограничение. Смертных случаев стало больше. В связи с этим в Казахстане ввели... Это я не понял, повторяет меня. Теперь в прошлом году для того, чтобы бороться с этой болезнью, из бюджета было выделено около 6 триллионов тенге. Ну, этого трудно понять, но для жителей других стран мира в нашей национальной валюте я просто хотел бы сказать, мы выделили значительно больше ресурсов по отношению к ВВП по сравнению с соседними странами и даже со многими европейскими странами. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста, покажите. В целом, этот слайд показывает, как складывалась ситуация в разных странах мира. Казахстанская экономика по итогам прошлого года упала на 2,6%. Это за последние 20 лет мы впервые имели отрицательный рост. Но в самом деле не только Казахстан, многие страны мира имели за прошлый год отрицательный темп роста. Еврозоне в целом падение составило более 7%. В целом по развитым странам падение общей экономики составило более 5%. В Японии, значит, более 5%. В целом мировая экономика за прошлый год упала на 4,3%. Инфляция в Казахстане оказалась чуть выше, чем мы запланировали, потому что мы из государственного бюджета выделяли огромные ресурсы на поддержание экономики. Скорее всего, это было связано именно с этим обстоятельством. Частично мы слегка смягчили денежно-кредитную политику, предоставили огромные льготы для хозяйствующих субъектов, особенно для субъектов малого и среднего бизнеса, в плане неуплаты налогов, освобождали от многих видов налогов и так далее. В целом из-за этого бюджет не получил 2,4 триллиона тенге. Значит, несмотря на предпринятые меры, реальные доходы населения за прошлый год упало более чем на 4%. Это тоже впервые за последние 20 лет. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Следующий слайд. Значит, этот слайд показывает, какие сектора очень сильно пострадали, какие более-менее адаптировались. Значит, в целом 54% ВВП Казахстана производится в тех секторах экономики, где влияние коронавируса оказалось умеренным или сильным. Значит, если по отдельным отраслям, либо секторам экономики, то этот слайд показывает картину. На самом деле отрасли экономики на функционирование которых оказал коронавирус влияние, значительно шире, но я здесь выбрал наиболее важные с точки зрения занимаемого удельного веса в структуре нашей экономики. Выбрал вот я несколько отраслей. Первое – транспорт и складирование, который в структуре экономики занимает 8,6%, где занято более 7% работающего населения. Эта отрасль по итогам прошлого года упала на 6,6%. Значит, мы вынуждены были ограничить функционирование данной отрасли из-за того, что функционирование этой отрасли могло оказать очень серьезное влияние как на здоровье населения, и поскольку занимает серьезный удельный вес, конечно, такие ограничения оказали серьезное влияние на развитие либо функционирование транспортного сектора. Следующая отрасль – это оптовая и розничная торговля, ремонт автомобилей и мотоциклов. Этот сектор экономики занимает более 18% в структуре нашей экономики. И в этих отраслях работает более 16% занятого населения страны. В целом, вот указанный сектор экономики упал более чем на 7,3%. Наиболее серьезное падение. Далее следом идет серьезное падение горнодобывающей промышленности. Эта отрасль занимает более 15% в структуре нашей экономики, но отрасль является капиталоемкой, значит, поэтому в этой отрасли всего 3,2 занятого населения работает, но впервые, опять-таки, за долгие годы эта отрасль показал отрицательный рост. Следующий слайд покажите, мы расскажем о причинах. Факторы, повлиявшие на падение отмеченных секторов экономики Казахстана. Ну, что касается транспорта и складирования, здесь много говорить не приходится, всем вам это понятно, потому что авиасообщение, железнодорожное сообщение было очень сильно ограничено. Только в Казахстане отдельные маршруты восстанавливаются. По-прежнему авиасообщение со многими странами мира у нас не функционирует. Железнодорожное сообщение внутри страны и за пределами страны, маршруты, которые следуют в соседние страны, они также были приостановлены из-за коронавируса. Все они оказали очень серьезное влияние на состояние транспортной отрасли. Оптовая розничная торговля. Значит, понятно, из-за карантинных мероприятий многие торговые центры полноценно не функционировали, ограничивались за исключением продуктовых магазинов. И по сей день в торговле в Казахстане существуют ограничения, по крайней мере, сегодня время функционирования торговых центров сильно ограничиваем в Казахстане, и развлекательные центры в торговых центрах, они не функционируют. В силу этого торговля по-прежнему ощущает влияние ограничительных мер. Что касается горнодобывающей промышленности, в первую очередь нефтяной сектор Казахстана сильно пострадал из-за того, что мы стали участниками соглашения ОПЕК+, куда вошли 10 стран-членов ОПЕК, плюс 13 стран, в том числе Казахстан, которые не являются членами ОПЕК. Это была вынужденная мера, надо было ограничить мировое производство нефти, потому что в апреле, как вы знаете, мировое потребление в течение одного месяца упало почти на 30%. В целом, по итогам 2020 года мировое потребление нефти упало на 9%. Это был очень серьезный кризис, поэтому наиболее крупные производители нефти приняли решение по ограничению производства нефти. И Казахстан стал участником, поэтому мы планировали более 90 миллионов тонн нефти добывать, но из-за принятых обязательств мы ограничились объемом производства 85 миллионов тонн. конечно, снижение объемов производства сказалось на объеме экспорта данной продукции. Таким образом, по существу, именно нефтегазовый сектор является в Казахстане основным сектором горнодобывающей промышленности, где было допущено снижение объема производства. В других отраслях горнодобывающей промышленности ситуация более-менее нормальная. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Конечно, есть отрасли, которые оказались в хорошем положении. Прежде всего, обрабатывающая промышленность Казахстана развивалась очень хорошо. Может быть, здесь сказалось опять-таки вот ограничительные меры. Из-за ограничения транспортного сообщения Казахстану приходилось самому производить многие товары народного потребления. В целом это сказалось положительно на динамику обрабатывающей промышленности. И эта отрасль промышленности показал 3,9% роста. Хотя мы понимаем, что функционирование данной отрасли могло оказать очень существенное влияние на распространение болезней. Поэтому все меры и усилия правительства было направлено на то, чтобы удерживать распространение болезней на предприятиях обрабатывающей промышленности. Строительная отрасль, по нашим оценкам, менее была подвержена влиянию коронавируса. И к тому же правительство выделило огромные ресурсы на поддержание строительной отрасли в целях создания дополнительных рабочих мест. Поэтому в целом строительная отрасль показал очень высокий рост в прошлом году. Значит, рост составил более 11%. Таким образом, именно строительная отрасль, в том числе жилищное строительство, стало двигателем экономического развития Казахстана за прошлый год. Сельское хозяйство также было менее подвержено. То есть казахстанское правительство сознательно пошло на стимулирование строительной отрасли и сельского хозяйства, потому что люди, которые работают в этих отраслях, преимущественно находятся на улице, что сельскохозяйственные работники, что работники строительной отрасли. Поэтому правительство направило серьезные ресурсы на поддержание этих отраслей. Поэтому сельское хозяйство показало рост на уровне 5,6%. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Факторы в двух словах. Мы поддерживали, как я уже сказал, обрабатывающую промышленность. Прежде всего, нам надо было медицинские препараты и средства индивидуальной защиты наладить за короткое время в Казахстане. Поэтому были выделены серьезные ресурсы на развитие этих производств. В результате фармацевтика Казахстана показала в течение года 47% роста. Мы поддержали производство легковых автомобилей, потому что это новые отрасли. Как предыдущая Айжан сказала, у нас наступает наше обязательство в рамках ВТО, поэтому по срокам мы тоже очень притеснены. Поэтому нам надо было быстрее поднять уровень локализации автомобильной промышленности, тем более производства легковых автомобилей. Для этих целей мы из бюджета были выделены более 8 миллиардов тенге дополнительных средств на поддержание производства легковых автомобилей, на льготного автокредитования. Как я уже говорил, на развитие строительной отрасли, на развитие сельского хозяйства оказало серьезное влияние освобождение хозяйствующих субъектов от многих видов налогов. В целом все это оказало положительное влияние на динамику этих отраслей. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Чего мы ожидаем в текущем году от экономики Казахстана? В целом, прошлом году экономика Казахстана упала, как я уже сказал, на 2,6%. Мы с определенным оптимизмом смотрим на развитие экономики в текущем году. Уверены, что горнодобывающая промышленность в текущем году покажет положительную динамику, потому что ограничение по объему производства нефти постепенно снижается. Следовательно, даже с учетом существующего ограничения, все равно мы должны получить положительный рост. Ожидаем, что обрабатывающая промышленность сохранит прошлогодний набранный темп. Оптовая и розничная торговля тоже должна показать положительную динамику из-за того, что вот меры, принимаемые странами мира, в том числе по вакцинации, они окажут положительное влияние на функционирование торговых точек. В целом ожидаем, что торговля покажет положительную динамику на уровне 2,4%. В строительстве, я думаю, что сохранится высокий темп на уровне прошлого года. Сельское хозяйство останется на уровне среднегодовых показателей. Это будет рост на уровне примерно 3,8%. И транспорт в этом году должен показать хорошую положительную динамику. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. С учетом всего сказанного, по нашим оценкам, думаем, что казахстанская экономика в этом году обеспечит рост на уровне более 4%. Мы здесь показали прогнозные показатели на текущий год по отдельным странам и регионам мира. Япония должна показать положительную динамику на уровне 2,5%. В целом ожидает, что развитые страны покажут более 3% положительного роста. В США 3,5%. Еврозона должна показать по предварительным оценкам не менее 3,6%. Но мировая экономика должна расти в текущем году темпом около 4%. Безусловно, положительное развитие мировой экономики окажет свое влияние на динамику роста казахстанской экономики. В целом думаем, что этот год станет значительно лучшим по сравнению с прошлым годом. Конечно, год будет непростым. Казахстанские руководители, политические руководители все это понимают, предпринимают все необходимые меры для оживления экономики Казахстана. Спасибо за внимание. У меня все.
Спасибо большое. Очень интересная презентация. Да, действительно, мы наблюдаем везде серьезный эффект, который пандемия возымела на экономике всех стран, в том числе Казахстана. Одним из вопросов, который стоит перед малыми и средними предприятиями и также крупными предприятиями в данный период является вопрос развития человеческих ресурсов и влияния данного фактора на дальнейшее развитие малых и средних предприятий Казахстана. В связи с этим я бы хотел попросить Айдану Тагизбаеву представить небольшой доклад по данному вопросу. Айдана, просим вас.
Добрый день, коллеги. Спасибо большое за предоставленную возможность рассказать о нашей деятельности. В целом, я, наверное,
big, but I'll briefly present it. And we have a lot of information that is similar to Mr. Jacques Beck's presentation, so I'm not going to dwell on those. Please, let's run the next slide now. By the way, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Aidana Togasbaeva. I represent Atomic and National Entrepreneurs Chamber. As my colleague mentioned before, we are not... we haven't seen a growth of GDP in 2020. It's remained at minus 2.6%. Goods production has, of course, increased, but services has declined by 5.6. Next slide. Now, as for the actively engaged working population, 7 million people, and that is 0.7% less than 2019. Next slide. Also, as the topic for today is small and medium enterprises, it's worth saying that the gross added value in SMEs in the country's GDP is 30.5%, and SMEs have increased 0.8%. That's as of January 1. Next slide. As a National Entrepreneurs Chamber, we always take surveys of the business. We ask them how their companies are feeling, what their plans are, and what their issues are. And as you know, the pandemic has also made its corrections. And considering the survey of March through September of 2020, we surveyed of 42.3 thousand employers. Their complaints
and they think that this is the problem, that there are restrictions. And for us, in the area where I work, 16% of employers actually cut number of their personnel, and also many send them to sabbatical leave. We have surveyed more than 42,000 of entrepreneurs. We surveyed them about the plans for 2021, what they are going to do, and 34% indicated. Just a second. Just 34% indicated that they are going to apply for government support measures. 32% indicated that they will cut internal costs, and 24% said that they are going to expand their business. Unfortunately, also 11.2% indicated that they are going to cut personnel in 2021. 10% indicated that they will work remotely, and 9.8% said that they are going to close their companies. Next slide, please. Business during lockdown restrictions. Currently, during the pandemic, we have such sectors of the economy where businesses have to face different restrictions. These are the shopping malls, markets, cinemas, fitness centers, and there are 15,000 companies that have full restrictions of their work. These are food courts, nightclubs, health centers, children's centers, and next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here, as the previous colleague actually talked about, what were the major support measures provided by the government in general, so we won't talk about that in detail. Let's move forward. Next slide, please. I would like here to talk about one of the support measures provided by the government. That was the support providing the payment of 42,500 tenge, and the chamber actually initiated that so that it is paid from the state fund of social insurance. And we provided many proposals. Most of these proposals were supported by the government, and 7.5 million tenge were paid as social support to people, and more than 4.6 million people received these payments. And if we talk from the point of view how this is related to employers, and there was many times this question asked. This is the support this is the support to employers, because employers could not support their personnel because they couldn't do any activities, and employers were not ready to pay the salaries as they did before because their incomes have dropped and they were facing lots of costs. So I think this support actually helped a lot, both to employees and to employers. Next slide, please. Here, as also the previous colleague talked about, they were anti-crisis program. This is the Employment Roadmap 2021. Operators of the state program is the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection of People. 1 trillion tenge of the budget was provided. There are more than 7,000 projects were announced. And due to the pandemic, we had the emergency situation declared, and government agencies started to develop this program. And this program was not agreed with everyone, and the National Chamber provided its recommendations. Half of these recommendations were supported, and currently at this year, 2021, the employment roadmap is being implemented, and the budget is about 400 million tenge. You probably know there is a state program in Kazakhstan. It is called Yenbek. There are 3 major areas of work. This is short-term training, and second area is the training of entrepreneurs. And Atamiken is the operator of the second area of work, and we implement the project. We train entrepreneurs on the basis of entrepreneurial activities. And as you see, we have the positive dynamics. The number of trained people is growing. In 2020, the number actually decreased due to the pandemic. We had to actually quickly develop a online platform, and we were using the distant remote method. And in general, I think that we had very good result because in 2021, 41% managed to open new businesses. And if we look at the structure of open businesses from 2017 to 21, there were 59% of companies opened in agriculture. And the rest areas accounted for 41%. More than 18,000 projects were opened. And the training also enables people to receive government state financing, microcredits, and grants that are used by people to open their businesses and create new jobs. Here at the slide, you can see the people who were trained and opened their businesses, and 97% of them are active entrepreneurs, active businesses. 93%, these are also the businesses that pay their taxes. Next slide, please. The Chamber of Entrepreneurs also provides the non-financial support. More than 7,000 enterprises were opened, and we provide the support. We help companies to enlarge, expand their businesses, and we help them to improve links with international partners. And we have trained companies and signed contracts, new contracts. Starting from the second half of 2019, so 1.5 years, by the end of December 2020, we had the project, and this is the employment center. Atamiken Koldao Ortalığı. We worked with the Ministry of Labor, and we helped unemployed people to find new jobs. Before the pandemic, we started this work. We created such mobile employment centers in Nur-Sultan, Shymkent, in Jambul Oblast, more than 20 centers. And these were mobile centers. And their major function was to provide proactive services to unemployed people. And during these 1.5 years, we consulted more than 268,000 people. More than 53,000 people were psychologically tested. So we helped them to find new jobs through psychological consultation. And we did a lot of work. We have engaged 160 psychologists, and they have developed this test to identify the capabilities of unemployed so that unemployed people could better understand in what area they can better use their capabilities or what they need to learn and what training we can provide to such person. So, for example, if we saw entrepreneurial capabilities, then such person would be sent to entrepreneurial training. And 11.8 thousand people were given jobs. And during the emergency situation, we were able to find jobs for 539 people. As many enterprises were actually thinking of cutting our personnel, but we managed to be more proactive and work online, and the result actually was good. We actually overachieved our KPIs. We have found jobs for more people and provided more consultations. I would like to talk briefly about our psychological service and what the results we have of after the testing. More than 50% of people in Kazakhstan who were consulted by us, there's more than 53,000 people, they prefer the managing positions. They are also interested to be journalists, to be active. 24% prefer doctors, profession, psychologists. 14% are interested to work as electricians, mechanics, engineers, and a small number of people, I think that's everywhere, 3% are interested to be musicians and artists and work in literature. And psychologists also identified that more than 45% who were tested, they do not have soft skills. So this is the communication skills, non-standard thinking skills, and the ability to work in a team. It doesn't mean that they don't have these skills, but when we were talking to them, when psychologists were talking to them, they identified that they lack some certain, maybe one or two skills. And they recommended that this person can work as a consultant, but he lacks a skill of working in a team, but he has a very good communication skills. Unfortunately, 6.8% of unemployed people who we have consulted, they have suicide thoughts. So they are in very hard life situations, and we tried to engage such people in training, in engagement programs, so that they could overcome such situations as quick as possible. Next slide, please. I don't think this is a very interesting slide, but I would like to say we have surveyed the people who were consulted at the mobile centers, and you can see the results here. Most of them actually have higher education. 31% have the TVET education. Next slide, please. Short-term education, this is the first area of Yenbek state program. And under this area, we train unemployed people. We train them for some working professions. So this is a several month program. And Atamiken is having a register of training educational organizations so that unemployed could choose where they can be trained. In our register, we have 878 training centers, and 378 of them are under certain enterprises. And the most popular professions that people would like to learn, this is the seamstress, a cook, a baker, manicurist, and other professions. Atamiken, the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs, is also conducting an independent rating of educational centers and higher educational institutions. We have analyzed 2,000 curriculum programs, and we have engaged more than 160 experts and provided 6,000 opinions. 101 educational programs enable their graduates to find the jobs. 50% of them, 71% is the average percent of jobs finding, which is 74% less than in 2019. So we have now more than 15,000 of graduates that didn't find jobs, and the average salary is 118,894 tenge. Next slide, please. So what we do at schools. Currently, we have developed textbooks for 10th and 11th grades, and there is a subject, the basis of entrepreneurs and business. That's a very easy to understand material, and also we have developed guidelines for teachers and notebooks for students. We have done competitions, Olympiads, and developed an internet platform. We have trained more than 1,700 teachers of schools, 402 teachers from colleges, and more than 100,000 students from schools and 42,000 students from colleges. Next slide, please. And in general, what can I say? This is our ecosystem of Atamiken. We started developing online. As you can see, the development of human potential is especially important, and we have a separate area for that. And people who are interested, they can choose different areas for training. Thank you. I tried to be concise. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. Thank you, Aidana. Well, actually, the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs is doing all it can to enable small and medium-sized businesses for development, to provide the support, to integrate international supplier chains and procurement chains of multinational companies. I would like to request Paris Kokorodskosis, who is CEO of Yara Consultants, to do his presentation. Please show the presentation on the slide. Paris, the floor is yours.
Good morning, and it's a great honor to attend and make a short presentation in that meeting. And I would like to congratulate all stakeholders, as well as SME participants of the SME project for their high level of engagement during this COVID difficult period. It's very important to mention, however, that the COVID period has also introduced some opportunities to the SMEs because they have learned to work remotely, and this remote working is part of the basic characteristic of SMEs working with multinational value chains. So I will try to focus on my presentation and the role of innovation, digitization, and I will give also some case studies from Oman in the petroleum sector of introducing SMEs to the international supply chains. So next slide, please. A very short understanding of what is a supply chain, the full range of a company activity, from product to service, and even beyond, after the buy from the client, is a value chain. International companies are usually working across the whole value chain, and SMEs, depending on their specialization, work in some of the pieces of this value chain. There are local SMEs, which are subcontractors to multinational companies working in their own country, but there are also international SME subcontractors working with multinationals in big value chains. So the major challenge now for local SMEs, and we can go to the next slide, is how to move from being part of a local supplier in a multinational, and if being a successful local supplier, how to become a supplier at the international level in other projects of the same or other multinationals in other countries. So usually it starts with a proper placement in the local value chain. So actually the jobs that multinationals, the works that multinationals appoint in the country of the SME origin. So this is what is this project about, is increasing the participation of SMEs in the value chain of multinational companies active in the oil, gas, and mining sector. So usually once the SME, after getting proper standardization, having done the proper compliance, has worked with the multinational and has proved after stage 2 that is a successful and reliable partner. It can work with the multinational with stable contractual relations. It can meet the buyer needs for volumes. It's flexible, it's efficient, it is adaptable to project changes. Then one could think of capitalizing this local delivery subcontracting performance and create the mechanism for approaching multinational projects outside of the country, where apart from the capacity, standardization, and performance, there is a need to upgrade also the staff that can work with international capabilities. Can we look at the next stage? Next slide, please. There are a lot of characteristics, performance characteristics that multinationals are looking for the SMEs, like quality, reliability, service, responsiveness, agility that we have discussed. But the major thing that is very important, and for which I will talk a little bit more, is the issue of the technology aspects, the innovation, and especially now with the pandemic, the command and operation of teleworking, virtual working, distance working, which is quite important. Can we go to the next slide, please? So, especially in the oil and gas sector and mining, the technological demands and evolutions of the projects are continuously increasing. Environmental issues, climate change issues, Green Deal issues, all these impose new standards, new technological levels of competence, and for the SME to succeed and maintain its position in the international value chain of multinationals, it's important that it is up to date. So one of the major activities that SMEs are performing in order to be present in international value chains is to create knowledge management tools, or to keep a knowledge management activity that is building up the know-how after completion of successful projects. Some SMEs also promote their employees and encourage employees to transform technical solutions of challenging contracts in one-off challenging contracts into generic company products and services that could be repeated to be sold to SME, to multinationals abroad. Next slide, please. Internationally, there are various schemes, and sorry for these detailed lists, but there are different types of support systems that are needed for entering the local value chain than the support systems for entering international value chains outside of the country. Some are common, like training skills. Standardization is necessary for the local participation, as we do. Market information and dissemination. Sometimes offset schemes, especially in public procurement. But for international promotion and entering the international value chains, additional schemes such as internationalization support schemes, participation in international clusters, and clustering is a very important tool for entering and partnering with bigger companies or even with other SMEs from other countries joining and participating in tenders of multinationals for projects abroad outside of the country. Also, states issue guarantee and insurance schemes for their local SMEs to participate in international projects. Now, I will give you very briefly, and I will soon finish my presentation with 3-4 slides, with our experience from Oman, which started as, next slide, please, it is called the In-Country Value Program, and the special program in the oil and gas sector had the target to increase in about 8 years, 7 years, the value from 18% to 32%, corresponding to about 64 billion US dollars. So the program is a program for local vendor development, increasing procurement of Oman goods and services, and Omanization of skilled contractor and personnel, but also at the end is to expand and launch new SMEs that could work with oil and gas industry multinationals, not only in Oman, but also abroad. Next slide, please. This is just a small presentation of the participants. You see some well-known names and some local names, and the numbers of achieved trainings for several technicians, managers, technical skills, supervisors, and so on. Next slide, please. The joint supplier registration system by Petroleum Development Oman that actually disseminated information and gave, with a single line supplier registration scheme, opportunities for all SMEs, and the monitoring system supporting SMEs and their performance with the multinational contracts. But more important are the next interventions. Next slide, please. I give you just one case of a local EPC contractor called Petrofac. Next slide, please. Let's skip this and go to the next. So the training and support with pilot plans for skills upgrading was a very important measure for updating the skills and the competencies of the personnel up to the multinational standards. And that was done through a local high-tech training center. Next slide, please. With pilot plans, with live process plans, with virtual and augmented reality simulations, and with a lot of training. Now, my last slide is how we helped the country to bring together, next slide, please, and the last one, how to bring the multinationals from the upstream oil and gas sector, the technology providers, together with the local companies. This is done through an innovation park, a science and technology park, where technology providers like the well-known multinationals, you know, also from your country, are hosted, and they provide tooling and engineering solutions within this technology park. And next to this technology park are the local SME technology partners of the multinationals. And this co-sourcing and cooperation is benefiting a lot the upgrade and upskilling of the local companies, but as well as it helps them to integrate easier and better to the multinational value chains outside of the country too. The same park also helped a lot of startups through a big incubator with workshops and tooling for oil and gas technologies to develop new startups in that area. So I would like to close my presentation with this slide and give you all my best regards for the continuation of this project and the effort of increasing the country's value in this oil and gas sector, and give the floor to my colleague Robert McKinney. Thank you.
Спасибо, доктор Бугородского, спасибо большое за интересную...
Thank you, Doctor, for this interesting presentation and for presenting to us how they put together these stakeholders. Now I'd like to pass the floor to our key expert, Robert McKean, who is going to tell us briefly about the impact of the pandemic on the SDP and the factors. Robert, please keep it brief. Thank you.
Роберт, вы нас слышите?
Robert, if you can hear us, maybe your mic is on mute because we cannot hear you yet, Mr. McKean.
You were correct. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be able to speak to you all today. And as I only have 10 minutes, I'll proceed immediately to my presentation. Asim, can you go to slide 1? So basically, what I'm trying to do there is to highlight the impact that COVID-19 had globally. And I have to thank Professor Kulikiv for a more extensive presentation, which allows me to briefly move on to the next slide. Asim. So it's important to understand that, that globally it is accepted that the effect of the pandemic has been much more severe on small and medium-sized enterprises than it has been on the large employers. And that is shown in the bar chart, which has come from an OECD study. It's referring to companies that anticipate them being distressed by the impact of COVID, where distressed is taken as expecting a fall in the book value of their assets, of their total assets. And as it shows, the small enterprises expect to suffer more than the large enterprises. If you can go to the next slide, Asim. So once again, having looked at global trends, COVID-related trends, this slide particularly looks at what was being expected in terms of the Kazakh economy in 2020. Once again, this has been covered in much more detail by Professor Kulkiv's presentation. So if you can go to slide 4. Now here, what I have to show you is obviously very, very scant, very, very little by way of the Atemikin presentation of Edana, which is much more comprehensive. But basically, the surveys that of SMEs that I was able to access are supporting this conclusion that the impact of COVID-19 was much more dramatic in the SME sector than it was for larger enterprises. Slide 5, please, Asim. SMEs during this period were squeezed by a combination of circumstances. First, the reductions in the demand for their own products. Secondly, by the need to cut production, which was brought about by the restrictions in terms of travel and numbers of people who could assemble at a given place. But we have to understand that the impact of production falls and of falling prices in key sectors like oil and gas and mining is also having a knock-on effect, in the sense that these large companies have no need to purchase the same amount of supplies when the demands for their products are falling. And the importance of seeking new suppliers in these conditions is going to be much less. So we have a chart here from the mining industry which shows how the production fell in the second part of the year. Next slide, Asim. So this is just emphasizing the point I've made, that we have to take into account the fact that the reduction of production in the large enterprises, the effects that was having on the SMEs. If we go to the next slide. Okay, so far, basically I've been covering much of the same terrain as was dealt with by Professor Kulkiev and Edina. And now I want to move on to consider what the impact of COVID-19 has been in terms of the Suppliers Development Project. So it's essential, first of all, I'm going to identify three main areas where COVID-19 has the potential to impact upon the delivery of suppliers development projects. And the first of these is relating to the collection of information which is necessary to make the SDP successful. So this information relates to the needs of the large suppliers and the processes that the large buyers, and the processes that the large buyers put in place to obtain their supplies. And it also, of course, relates to the needs of the SMEs and what is required for a supplier development project in terms of support to the SMEs to improve their quality levels and their efficiency, to move them up the chain, to make them more attractive as potential suppliers. Next slide, Asim. Now, the conventional process of acquiring this information is, of course, to have regular meetings with the large buyers and the SMEs to establish what their requirements are and to be able to identify which are the important areas to be tackled if we're trying to match the demands of the large buyers to the potentials of the SMEs. Now, of course, under COVID-19 restrictions, under pandemic restrictions, the conventional approach of holding meetings where the individual participants get together and talk through these issues under guidance from the SDP, from the project, this may not be possible. We were fortunate in that our project had started in July 2019, and we had a number of months before we had to face the repercussions of the COVID-19 restrictions. But it produces some challenges under these restrictive conditions collecting information from the two principal beneficiaries of the project, when it's not possible to sit them down together and to have detailed discussions. If we can move on to the next slide, Asim. So here in the second paragraph, we relate to the timing of our project, which was such that the Meet the Buyer events, which we were obliged to hold, were targeted at stages of the project where the COVID-19 restrictions were effective. Now, normally, the planning of the Meet the Buyer event would be based on the organisation of a location, an event location, and the organisation of a meeting, an event which would bring the procurement staff and the local content staff of the large enterprises together with the small and medium-sized enterprises in the context of organising individual meetings where they could the buyers could put their demands directly to the SMEs, and the SMEs could inform the large buyers of what they had the potential to be able to do. Now, this was not possible. If we can move on to the next slide, Asim. It was not possible to organise conventional Meet the Buyer events, and consequently the Meet the Buyer events that were organised and held under the SDP in Kazakhstan, of which there were 3, were all organised as virtual Meet the Buyer events. Now, there's a figure here which shows in the top right-hand corner of the slide, which shows that there are advantages that come from the organisation of virtual events, in the sense that they are usually much less costly to organise and hold. But this figure also shows that there are a number of disadvantages. And these are rather important for an SDP project. One is that it is more difficult to communicate effectively when you don't have the possibilities of individuals to meet on a face-by-face basis. And secondly, it's less likely that collaboration, post-event collaboration, will take place when the format of the Meet the Buyer event has been virtual rather than physical, if I can put it that way. Now, down below, we have another graphic, we have a bar chart, which looks at the 3 Meet the Buyer events, which the project was able to organise. And as you can see, in terms of the colours, blue, orange and grey, blue being the first Meet the Buyer, grey the orange the second, and grey the third. There has been a progression, there has been an improvement in terms of the numbers participating and the numbers of meetings that were being organised and held. And this reflects the success that we were able to achieve in the organisation of the Meet the Buyer events. And this success has to be remembered, has been achieved in times when COVID-19 restrictions applied. So if we move to the next slide, ASEM. But it also, we have to also acknowledge that while it's possible to hold virtual Meet the Buyer events successfully, it requires effort on the part of the organizer, effort which is not required at the same levels of intensity when organizing a physical event. So that special measures have got to be introduced to try and replace the communication that is lost when the event goes virtual. I'm talking about the possibility for participants to meet outside the programmed meetings and to hold discussions between themselves. And as I say here in the slide, there are a number of features that have to be introduced and developed if you wanted to make the Meet the Buyer event as successful as possible. So now we've finally turned to the issue of the assessment of the enterprises. And in our project, we had to assess 200 SMEs. Now, the onus of the assessment required falls upon the SMEs, since the large buyers in general have already supply contacts and are issuing supply contracts. And while we are looking for new suppliers, are interested in making sure they have the most cost-effective, the most flexible suppliers as possible. All these features that Paris outlined in his presentation. So if we can now move to the next slide, Sam. So the assessment that we conducted involved visits to every single SME, during the visit, meetings with the management teams and managers to elicit information from them, to extract information from them, to demand verifications of information where we felt that the information on its own wasn't suggestive enough, and always a visit of the premises and the site. So this was conducted in every single one of the 200 SMEs visited, and this process takes the best part of one day. Next slide, Darcy. So the three components, the three important parts of the verification of the information involved because of the physical presence at the meeting, it involved the opportunity to ask follow-up questions and extract more information, to demand from the management or ask the management to produce visual proofs in terms of documentation or showing computer screens to verify what they've said, and the importance of this site visit, which is undertaken by the assessors. Next slide. Now we have to say, and you have to understand, that we were extremely fortunate in the SDP in Kazakhstan, that all of our business reviews, all of these assessments took place before COVID-19 restrictions were imposed. All the business reviews were completed by mid-March. And this meant we were able to conduct these assessments under normal conditions. In the slide that you're now looking at is what would have to take place if you were trying to conduct the same assessments, the European Foundation for Quality Management assessments, but did not have physical presence, physical access. That is to say, if the process had to become virtual. And these are the kind of activities that would have to be developed to get the rigor that is involved in the process. Final slide, Asem. So these are the aspects of assessment that would have to be added under COVID-19 restrictions to make sure you're getting the quality information that the EFQ model requires. That draws my presentation to a conclusion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Robert, спасибо большое за...
Robert, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation about how the pandemic affected the supply development project. I would like to say that the most of the project was implemented during the pandemic, and all the related activities had to be adapted to the lockdown restrictions. But as we understand, the pandemic creates risks not only for the project, but also for SMEs and also for large buyers as well. And for this issue, I would like to invite Timur Bakhajanov, head of the Directorate of Internal Control of the Kaz Minerals Management Company. And we will hear the report on the risk management in terms of procurement during the COVID-19 pandemic. Timur, please, the floor is yours. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, all the participants. I'm very happy to hear you. And I think that my time is limited, so I will get to the presentation. So we'll talk about the risk management in terms of procurement during the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions. Next slide, please. Well, actually, procurement has developed a program for ourselves. And we were not actually waiting for the emergency situation to be announced. And at the end of January, we already understood, because we were monitoring the situation in China, and we actually were thinking that the coronavirus is likely to spread all over the world. More and more countries are involved. Italy also faced infections, breakouts, confirmed cases, and at that time, we already started taking some measures. So we have, first of all, prohibited personnel to visit certain areas to minimize infection cases. And my presentation will be a short one. We'll present this information in brief, and the major data will be given as of the end of March 2020 and beginning of April. So let's start. The major objective of the procurement service was not to stop the production process of the company, of Kaz Minerals Group. And so that we could avoid this, we needed to assess the current situation all over the world and in Kazakhstan and define the risks and start the risk management. Next slide, please. At this slide, you see that information about the situation at that time in the world. That was as of the end of first quarter of 2020. So the whole world faced difficulties, logistics difficulties in railway, in sea transportation, in air transportation. There was a time increase, and the number of aviation flights, reduced number of sea ships also reduced, and the number of such transportation lines decreased. What this resulted in? So the delivery time increased up to 1 month. Before we could receive below 1 month, now we had to wait up to 2-3 months. And also all over the world, there was we could see that the factories are closing all over the world. Some factories, some plants could not continue working just because they didn't have enough raw materials. There was interruptions in the global supply chains, and that was the problem that arose during the pandemic. We currently see how countries depend on each other. And of course, our Kazminerals Group personnel value the safety of its personnel, and this is not related only to people who work in the field, but also in the office. And we managed to stop all the site visits that were not urgent, and we let people visit only those people who had this directly related to their contract implementation. And companies that committed violations, they were disciplined. They could use the force majeure clause, and that's why there was no adverse effect on the suppliers. Next slide, please. As for the situation in Kazakhstan, I will not talk about it in details because you all know that we had difficulties with logistics. Even the movement within Kazakhstan was difficult, and the supply of food products, medical, pharmaceuticals, there were some difficulties. There was deficit. For example, 3M company that is working on production of individual protective means. So protective equipment, they had to produce and deliver only to the American market. So the whole world had to face the deficit. And there were also difficulties of the access of foreign personnel to Kazakhstan. They were prohibited of entering Kazakhstan. And we could see the rise in costs of services, and there were risks of infection through suppliers and the risks of not implementing contractual obligations. Next slide, please. Well, as you see, we have analyzed the situation, and we have seen 9 red risk zones, and we started working on them. Logistics, stock management, services, strategic suppliers, warehouse management, food products, medicals and medical services provision, finance, personnel, communication management, and legal issues. Next slide, please. Speaking about logistics, as I said before, the whole world had difficulties with logistics, with ensuring seamless deliveries of products and services. And to minimize this risk, to manage this risk, our company has taken certain measures, such as a daily update of the information about borders, where we have products crossing borders. So we were following all the borders. What are the status? How the products can cross the customs checkpoints? Are there lockdown restrictions or not? So we were following that information about the border with every country where we have to deliver our goods through. And also, they were internal deliveries, and our personnel were working with the local suppliers, checking if there are delays and what are the issues. And all the fields, the deposits were actually warned that there will be longer time of delivery, so that when they order certain goods, that they could do this order in advance, because the logistics took longer than before. Next slide, please. Speaking about stock management, every company, every production company has a list of goods, and we call it strategic and critical goods. These are the goods that that makes it impossible to produce without, and that includes the products that are needed for maintenance and overhaul. And at the first stage, we have identified such products for every company in the Kazmineral group of companies, for every deposit. And we have identified the approximate delivery time periods of such products due to the pandemic restrictions. And we have identified what should be the insurance stock, what should be the quick stock. And it was such stock should be available for 3-6 months. That was that kind of insurance stock for us. Next slide, please. Speaking about services, the same thing about products. We have identified the list of critical and strategic services needed for the group of companies. And we have identified the full list of suppliers that are our strategic suppliers, so that we could understand their situation, where they source their products to fulfill their services. And we were working on a daily basis with these suppliers of products and services.
Если требовалась помощь там с нашей стороны, то, естественно, оказывалась поддержка. При необходимости.
We of course rendered the support if needed, and we addressed the government bodies as well if support was required in providing movement, the movement of these contractors and suppliers of goods and services, so that they could supply their goods and services to us on time. Next slide, please. For the strategic suppliers, we've defined, it's not that we've defined, but we always had it, a list of strategic suppliers, large suppliers such as Borusan, Makina, who supply parts to us, Caterpillar, diesel fuel suppliers, large suppliers that take up a considerable share in procurement. And for each supplier, we did an analysis of their current situation, let's say. And not only with specific suppliers, but also with their subcontractors. Because as I mentioned before, many factories were closing because they didn't have enough raw materials. They had a deficit of raw materials. So we would talk to the actual supplier, and then further on would talk to the second and third link in the chain of these supplies to understand whether we have risks of, let's say, tires, large sized tires. We procured Michelin, and let's say if Michelin wasn't planning on closing, but for instance they would have a deficit of rubber, we would talk to Michelin and the rubber producers as well in order to understand what the risks were, in order to react fast and switch to another supplier of large-sized tires. Move on. Now, in terms of storage, warehousing, as we decided to provide an insurance supply to the time frame of 3 to 6 months, we did some work on determining our warehouse capabilities, and where needed, we would organize additional storage facilities or reach an agreement with suppliers that they would do the same. Additionally, we urged lean consumption across Kazminerals to minimize consumption of those products that are strategically and critically important for production facilities. Next slide. Now, foodstuffs. Supplying with foodstuffs. At first, as you remember, it was a bit of a panic when people started buying all the food from the stores just before the lockdown. Just before the state of emergency. So a certain deficit has arisen of foodstuffs. We started analyzing the whole situation as well with our suppliers who provide catering and food services to our employees. We started cooperating with them, did so on a daily basis, so that if they have a certain deficit of foodstuffs, that we would be able to promptly respond. Next slide. For medical services and provision with medicines, it's a similar situation. We talk to the company that provides medical services to us on a daily basis. We would check to see if they were still able to cover our needs for our medical products and the needed equipment, as well as organizing quarantine areas. If some of the employees were to have symptoms of the disease, they were supposed to help us organize a quarantine zone. It's pretty much the same as with the foodstuffs. Next slide. Now, finance. In the coronavirus circumstances, a situation has arisen where we had to build reserve, and that of course has impacted finance in the company. So on a running basis, together with the financial service, we were working on considering raising the expenses of the company, and the additional expenses all had to be coordinated with the finance department of Kazminerals Group in order for the finance department to be ready that expenses could increase for the short term. And legal issues, as you know, the subsoil users of the Republic of Kazakhstan carry out their procurement according to the confirmed regulations of procurement of goods and services. So we have government regulation of procurement activity. And so in these difficult conditions that we found ourselves in, I mean the oil and gas and the whole world, we had to make prompt decisions on procurement because we had severe deficit of pretty much all products that are critically essential for production, due to which Kazminerals Group initiated an address to the Ministry of Infrastructure and Development in order to make temporary amendments to the regulations of procurement in order to simplify procurement for the period when the state of emergency was in place. They agreed to it, and we made these temporary changes. Apart from that, our internal procedures of the company were simplified as far as possible from every angle. And as I mentioned already, all of the suppliers now had a box they should tick about force majeure, and we worked on that with the legal department in order to minimize those risks that suppliers would have to be as responsible as possible when carrying out their contract obligations. Next slide, please. Staff management and communications. As I mentioned before, Minerals Group focuses firstly on the safety of its staff, so we switched to remote working in order to minimize risks on decreasing the effectiveness of our work. We did daily meetings with the staff members. We asked them about their health, the health of their close ones, family members, and thus we minimized all meetings with the suppliers, with the government bodies. We put that all in remote mode, into Zoom. We made all the meetings on these online platforms. Could have been Microsoft Teams, Skype, or Zoom. Next slide. Oh, so that was it for my presentation. Sorry for taking a bit more time than I was supposed to. Good health to everybody. Stay safe. Yes, it was very nice to listen to, and it was interesting to learn which measures you took considering the situation at hand. Now I'd like to take this opportunity and tell our participants very briefly about the SDPs that we were doing in Kazakhstan and are still doing. Our project was called Creating the Service of Supplier Development and Developing its Competences and Implementing Pilot Projects, and its main objective was creating the service of supplier development and providing technical and financial support to SMEs of Kazakhstan and ensuring supplies to MNCs. The project started in July of 2019, and it was broken down into 4 parts, and as you can see on the slide, we did a lot of work. Now, much additional work apart from this was done in order for us to be able to achieve these results. Now, just 7 months of the project were in normal mode, after which the pandemic started, and then Euro Consultants Group and all of the experts took measures in order to, first of all, keep the staff of the project safe, and of course to not compromise the outcomes and the objectives of the project. It should also be noted several important things and some achievements. We were able to create an institutional structure in which the service of supplier development could act further on in close cooperation with our partner, Kazakhstani Industry and Export Department. We also held 3 Meet the Buyer events, and it was at these events that the potential suppliers were able to communicate with their potential buyers. Of course, before that, we selected the participants, selected over 200 SMEs. From 200, we still work with them. Still, we worked on personal capacity building of the staff, and we did ongoing work on getting partners from multinational corporations. That had to do with 3 stages of the project. We also organized training visits for the SDPs and for the SMEs abroad. We did 2 rounds of assessment. We call them business assessment 1 and 2. And we developed short-term plans for SMEs based on which they demonstrated improvements in certain parameters. Parameters of assessment. We created a database of suppliers which has the potential of growing and even outside of the industries at hand. Right now we only work with mining and oil and gas, but further on, of course, it may also encompass other industries, and the database gives us an opportunity to scale it, and it can contain all of the necessary information which can be interesting for potential buyers. In the last phase, the 2.2 stage, we visited the top 100 SMEs 3 times each. We help them with accreditation in the database. Right now that process is still ongoing, and we also render support in certifying SMEs, and we have a separate budget for reimbursement. As we know that certification, especially for certain areas, can be expensive, and not every SME has the opportunity to invest in a certificate like this, especially considering our currently difficult circumstances. We also organized a competition of Supplier of the Year, which was won by a company that showed the biggest improvement between the 2 business assessments. And in the end, I'd like to say that the project is still continuing to this day. We continue to support SMEs in their accreditation process, and we also continue further work with them on certification. Next slide. Here are a few, let's say, key digital indicators. Currently, we have 149 SMEs which can be eligible to reimbursement, and reimbursement means 70% of the total certificate cost, considering they adhere to the rules. And the rules are the certificate should be international, and the company that's eligible for reimbursement should be Kazakhstani, should have the majority of shares in Kazakhstan. And the companies are currently eligible to $1.7 million, and that's not the final amount. We continue to work with the companies, and if all companies are eligible to all conditions, this can grow. Now, of course, these are the ISO certificates that we're talking about, the quality management ones, the 9001, also environmental aspect management and health and safety. There are specific sectoral certificates such as the ASME, the International Electric Commission certificate, the American Petroleum Institute, and quite a few standard certificates of the European Economic Union. Next slide, please.
По вопросам аккредитации.
In terms of accreditation, we already can state now that 39 SMEs have finished 66 processes of accreditation, meaning that one SME can do their accreditation with multiple MNCs, and we have 43 SMEs which are currently in the process of 86 accreditation processes. As I said, this work is ongoing, and we are making every effort in order to speed up the process. Now, Sam, I'd like to ask you to run the video. Dear participants, we'd just like to show you a few of our memorable moments from our project in this brief video. Thank you.
Можно мне секунду, пожалуйста?
I just need a second.
Асем, давайте я запущу, если у вас там технический.
Awesome. Let me run the video then if you have a technical difficulty. Yes, of course. The history of the Supplier development project in Kazakhstan. and Business Review Training, August 2019. Procurement Training, September 2019. Presenting the Kazindustry Project. Basic EFQM Expert Training. EFQM Validator Training. Study trip to Prague, Czech Republic. First consultative seminar. Cases. Quality management training. Project management training.
Надеюсь, всем было видно. Спасибо вам
I
еще раз.
hope you could see the video. Thank you again for your attention. And now I would like to invite the winner of our nomination, Supplier of the Year, Antarium Group, Yerlan Atajan, General Director. Thank you, Georgi. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me well. Well, this program was very useful to us. And I'm not talking just about our company, but talk in general about the companies participating in the project. These are SMEs that have the customers from the biggest two sectors of Kazakhstan. These are the oil and gas sector and mining sector. And talking about the today discussion, I would like to give you information not just about our company, but such companies as ours and how this program affected us, what we have realized, how the pandemic affected us. And actually, there are opportunities everywhere. Well, let me give you some information about our company. First, Antarium Group is a construction installation company, and we are the general contractors in oil and gas and mining projects. And we have many producers and suppliers of equipment, and we work with all of them. We've been working in the oil and gas sector, and we've been working in mining sector. We try to diversify our jobs, and we build houses so that we can expand our business. What was the major useful thing from the benefit of participating in supply development program? We have improved the quality of our management. Of course, we had the understanding that we need to develop our human capital. Well, actually, Kazakhstan companies, SME companies in Kazakhstan, they actually are quite advanced, and they can be competitive, and they can work with large companies in Kazakhstan, and we can be a good equal replacement for foreign suppliers that already work in Kazakhstan, because we can ensure a high quality, and high quality of our engineers and technical personnel is quite high. And we have had the study tours, and we have studied cases of other countries. This was all useful. In general, oil and gas sector in Kazakhstan is a very competitive, even at the world level. It is competitive at the corporate management, and oil and gas companies have been developing the local suppliers for their needs. Oil and gas is clear. And as for the mining industry, for example, Kaz Minerals, Kazakh company, I hope this pandemic will help those companies also to make the program to engage more local SMEs, so that they could cover their needs with local suppliers. The pandemic, of course, affected all of us, and especially the SMEs, where the incomes and the rate of returns are lower compared to the larger businesses, and the pandemic is quite painful for us. And we decided that this time is not the time of making money, but this is the time of learning, so that we should maintain the same quality, the high quality of our products and services. Our costs have increased, very considerably increased. We, for example, even talking about Kaz Minerals, in order to work with them, we will it will take us a month or even longer, because we will need to take the safety measures and training to ensure the safety of people and health safety. So this year was quite challenging for us. And what is the most important benefit of the pandemic? We hope that the large companies will place orders in Kazakhstan. And I would like to talk on behalf of all SMEs who participated in this program. I would like to say that we have local companies who are ready to provide high quality substitution of your foreign suppliers, and we are ready to provide the services and products needed by you. And I hope that this program, supply development program, will actually be conducive for SMEs development in Kazakhstan. This is it on my side. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Yerlan.
Конечно, мы все знаем, какой эффект возымело.
We know how pandemic affected business and our lifestyle, but I think we are all interested to look in the future, and the project of supply development service I would like to give to talk about the future, and would like to invite Ruslan Ibrahimov, Director of the Center of Industry Cooperation and Regional Development. Let's talk about how the SDS will develop in future. Colleagues, good afternoon. I hope you can hear me well. Yes, we can hear you well. I had some issues with the internet. Well, thank you very much. Yes, we have done a huge work together with our partners, including Euro Consultants company. And we wouldn't be able to do this work without participation of the ministries, Ministry of National Economy, Ministry of Industry, Atomic Chamber of Entrepreneurs. And speaking about the future of the program, in 2021, we plan, talking about things in general. In the state program of industrial innovation development for 2020-2025, we have described the steps of the further development of the project. So we will focus on the competences received, and we will continue helping SMEs in improving their export opportunities. And also, we will help in import substitution. Our key objectives will be the support in transition to international quality standards, to quality management systems, and the use ensuring that we have the certain knowledge and skills that SMEs lack currently. And we will help the development, the technological development, and creating new products with higher value added. And the main thing will be about the fact that we will identify more opportunities for producers. We, as the development institution, have the information about the procurement done by our large subsoil users, and we will work on creating some adjacent production sites with large enterprises. This will enable us to further develop manufacturing of competitive products, of those products that have never been produced before in Kazakhstan. And I would like to say once again that all these steps and tools are already available, and they are already defined in the state program for 2020-2025. I can give you examples because in parallel to our project, in the recent 2 years, we were working on certain local producers who are already ready to supply their products to multinationals. It took us just 2 years, and there were contracts made between the SMEs and large companies up to 16 billion tenge. I don't remember the exact figure. And in future, supply development program will work in this area. This will be B2B meetings, as well as there will be specific targeted help provided to SMEs about their technological development and about the support measures that we have available in our development institute. And we also work with the large companies, provide them assistance in selecting local suppliers. Every year we have a clear picture when large businesses do their procurement and buy products and services abroad, but we can see that it is available in Kazakhstan. There are opportunities, so we can actually help to select local suppliers for multinationals. So there's such suppliers that probably do not know about such opportunities, or multinationals do not know about the local suppliers. So we can fill in this gap. This is it from my side, speaking in a nutshell. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ruslan. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for our daily work, for your daily assistance. I can see that you're in the office, and we've been sitting there very close to you before the pandemic, and we hope that we'll visit you again and we'll work side by side. Distinguished participants, we have a few questions. As you know, we had the comments at the YouTube channel, and I would like to address some of the questions to my colleagues. There is such a question, and I would like Boyan Yankovic to answer. Could you please tell us about your experience working in Kazakhstan and compare this experience of working in Serbia on the same program? What was similar? What was different? What would you recommend for future development at Kazakhstan? Boyan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Georgie. Good afternoon to everyone. First, apologies, my video is not working, but I'll try to make it up by some useful information. My name is Boyan Yankovic, and I was a key expert on the supplier development program in Kazakhstan. And as Georgie said, I also was involved in the similar programs that were implemented in Serbia. But before I start, I would just like to give one short positive comment. Somebody said something about long-term perspectives in the global industry regarding the COVID. So I know the situation currently, and as it was portrayed by Robert and also by our friends from Kazakhstan, that the current situation is difficult, but there are changes that this COVID has kind of accelerated, and these are the changes in the global value chains that we are witnessing at the moment. Until recently, the globalization and global supplier network were something that the major multinational companies and all the companies were kind of used to, and they were developing these kind of linkages. But because of the COVID and some other changes in the global economy and global politics, there has been definitely something that is called the shortening of the value chains, meaning that the value chains are getting closer to the final destination, getting closer to the final customer. And this is being proven, and COVID has only kind of magnified these changes, because these offer flexibility and offer diversification to multinational companies, so they wouldn't be in a situation like Kaz Mineral described, where there are some raw materials missing or some parts missing. So in that sense, I think that, of course, COVID is a great threat, and we are witnessing these changes, but I think that on a regional level, on a local level, it will have an impact, and I think it will give the companies who are currently working on themselves, as our winner of the Supplier of the Year said, like, this is the time for knowledge, this is the time for improving the capacity of the company and moving digitally and so on. And I would say that this is definitely the right time for supplier development programs in general. And now, regarding the programs and differences between Serbia and Kazakhstan, I can say that in Serbia, the first project was in 2006 and 2007, and we have seen very similar kind of problems and issues that the Kazakh companies are facing. So let's say 15 years ago, we had the same kind of issues, but looking back at it now, and especially visiting some of these companies during the first study tour with our Kazakh SMEs, we could have seen how big of an improvement in majority of these companies has been demonstrated. And a lot of it is not related only to investments in technology and equipment, but investments in processes, in management capacity, and in marketing and sales in general. So I would say that Kazakh companies, some of them are very well advanced into digital age. They are also very well of this production improvement methods such as Kaizen, 5S, Lean, Six Sigma, in some of the companies in Kazakhstan, we really saw these methods being implemented. However, I do have a feeling that it is limited to a certain number of companies, and that the outreach and the improvement in terms of numbers can be surely bigger. And I hope that this program has influenced this at least to a level. Thank you.
Спасибо, Боян, спасибо за содержательный ответ.
Thank you, Boy, and thank you for the substantial answer. We have one more question. The question is about the following. What are the major difficulties for suppliers in accreditation with the multinational corporations at the initial stage? I will request Dilara Baykanova to answer this question. Dilara, please, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for a very interesting conference. So we had a lot of work done, and we still continue working about how to provide assistance to SMEs in accreditation with large multinational companies. So the question was about the initial stage. And I can say that first we studied what the company does. We did the analysis, what multinationals would meet the needs of this SME, what can be the matches.
Спрос на товары, работу, услуги данного ТНК. Далее непосредственно мы высылали
We did daily meetings. We explained to them how to get documents together. So all the important work for the company to get the documents together, and on an initial stage to get them to the MNC. So a lot of work was done. We were like the bridge in between the SMEs and the MNCs in order for the accreditation to take place successfully. Now this work, as Georgi already mentioned, is still being done with these organizations. For SMEs, also certain SMEs are really into the process. They're actively involved, and they got documents together for several accreditations and registrations at the same time. We're still working with some of them. The process is ongoing. Thank you.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо.
Thank you, Dilara. That's absolutely right. We continue the process. Our support is still ongoing for the business, and it will continue till the end of the project, as we have certain indicators there. And now I'd like to ask our colleague Saltanat Abdikarimova to also say a couple of words. Saltanat, please.
Ой, извиняюсь, не Салтанат.
Oh, I'm sorry. We've got a question about measures of support, and I'd like to ask that question to Aidana. The question is the following. Now, our participants are writing that support for SMEs, grants or subsidies for the beginning of business can boost the economy. Do we have similar measures, or maybe they are already in place? So grants, subsidies, or other means of support to begin the business. Yes, of course, these support measures are present. And I'd also like to mention that in the conditions of the pandemic, the government understands that people are left with no income and are increasing subsidies, increasing micro financing. When we taught the population the basics of entrepreneurship, not everybody would have enough money, and now they're making a very small interest rate in growing the number of grants. So the measures of support were there, and they continue, and they even grow considering the situation in the country.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much for your answer. Another question that I'd like to address to Nenad Bojanic. Nenad, the question is, what does increasing competitiveness do in SMEs for the economy in general? What did this do for Serbia, and what can we expect in Kazakhstan, Nenad?
Hello, good afternoon to everyone, and good morning to Tatiana. Thank you everyone for participating in the conference. I think it is important to share the experience and the best cases actually that happened, and of course what we have done and what we will do within the supply development project in Kazakhstan. Definitely one of the benefits what we provided to the SMEs was the business reviews with one main ideas to actually show them how to work more efficiently and how to work with a more profit at the end, because that is what is turning and running all the businesses, especially small and medium-sized businesses, and how this will help them actually to become or to be a better supplier to the multinational companies, and how to cross from tier 3 or 2 to the tier 1 and to be direct supplier to the multinational companies. The moment, for example, we started that in Serbia, not so many companies didn't know why and how to do this and how to increase effectiveness in addition to increase the profit. And the business reviews and EFCAM was a very good starting point. I think that the same will happen to Kazakhstan's small and medium-sized companies. And most of the companies now, 15 years after we started, for example, the first project in Serbia, are export-oriented. That was the best and greatest benefit that the Serbian SMEs actually achieved by starting with a supplier development project. Of course, there is a big difference between two projects, because the Serbian was more oriented to increase the foreign direct investment. But I think that we also have a very great stand and very great moment to accelerate the FDIs also in Kazakhstan by supplier development project that we started there. And definitely there is a great pace and there is a great moment in Kazakhstan. First of all, I have to say that Kazakhstan is the world champion by number of SMEs that participated in the very first supplier development program. So even though after 4 supplier development projects in Serbia, we cannot still say that we had more than 200 SMEs participating. So the number and the recruitment of the companies in Kazakhstan, I think it was a great achievement. Also thanks to the great support from Kaz Industry and the Tamekian. And if we have in mind that we passed all those stages of the project and where we are now with the supporting the certification issue, I think that all those companies who actually passed to the very last phase of this project are very good companies, very good base of companies to continue to work with, because we must have in our minds the fact that supplier development program, it's not a program for startups. It's a program for already matured or companies who is heading to mature their businesses. And in that respect, I think that this group of companies, which we are dealing now in certification and accreditation process, are actually forming the great group of SMEs to continue to work with. And I do believe that that all what we have learned and what we left within the project and will be used by our partners in the future to accelerate SMEs development and to be in a position to say that SME are really be the very or one of the key important drivers of the economy in Kazakhstan.
Спасибо, Nenad. Спасибо большое за...
Thank you, Nenad. Thank you for your answer. Dear participants, I'm thinking that our conference is drawing to a close slowly. I was told that Tatiana's technical difficulty was corrected. Tatiana, I suggest you say a couple of words, and that's before we finish the conference. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me now. Thank you. Well, first of all, words of gratitude for the opportunity to participate in this conference. I learned a lot, and I don't regret devoting this night to you. And as you know, I'm the head of the project of the World Bank that supports the program of supplier development. It's called the Program of Developing the Competitiveness of SMEs in Kazakhstan. And me personally, as the head of this project, believe that this SDP is the most tangible in order to achieve the main objective of our project, namely to assist SMEs in Kazakhstan to become as competitive as possible. And I personally, as an operations person, for me it's important to materially see what can be achieved with our joint effort. And if we're able to assist the SMEs in getting accreditation, which in turn will help the SMEs not only within Kazakhstan, but also to go into the international market, maybe in the EU, and even beyond that, and to conquer new land, all of that will just help them increase their competitiveness further, and will of course help develop the economy in general. And so, me personally, I'm very happy to see and hear you in spite of the difficult circumstances that we found ourselves in. Happy to see this progress in this program. And of course, I wanted to mention that as we've already been shown all the stages of the program, the most important stage was supposed to take place during the period of the pandemic. And this just shows the resilience and the adaptability and the ability to survive in various circumstances, even not so favorable ones. That just goes to show the sustainability and resilience of the SME. So once again, words of gratitude from me and my colleagues who are here as well. This is Gauhar Spanova, my co-project head, and Aset Bijan, our private sector development specialist, and our partners from the Ministry of National Economy, Iskander Aliyev, namely, who's in charge of a project implementation group. We are quite excited by what we've seen and heard, and are prepared to render comprehensive support further in order to, in spite of all the barriers and all the circumstances, to finish the third stage, the most important stage, the final stage of the supplier development program under the Increasing Competitiveness Project of SMEs. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you for your speech. And to finalize, I'd like to ask Mr. Nikos to say a few finishing words, and at that, our conference will be drawn to a close. And I'd like to thank our speakers and participants. Thank you very much. And wishing the best to everyone. Nikos, please.
Georgi, colleagues, thank you all very much for your participation and all your comments, and of course the audience for staying with us for the past 2.5 hours. So I would like to briefly summarize the key insights from this conference. I think it became evident that, first of all, SDS program was something that was needed for the country and needed for the economy. And I think it was already evident from the findings that both SMEs as well as multinational companies very much benefited from the activities. We think that the development of supplier development program and as a continuity that the Kaz industry will undertake further is very significant. Of course, we're obliged to work under difficult conditions, meaning the COVID pandemic, but of course, we realized that this could also become an opportunity for SMEs to look further into their strategic priorities and to try to become more competitive in terms of upgrading skills, upgrading partnerships, resources, and so forth. It is important that the state in Kazakhstan has already put in place several measures to support the economy, to the employees, and to minimize the effects of the pandemic. We have realized through a series of presentations today that COVID can act as an opportunity to enable local SMEs to become integrated in global value chains, to upgrade their standards, to upgrade their personnel and their knowledge management systems. So we consider that innovation can act as a catalyst for supporting the integration of SMEs in these chains. With regards to project implementation, we think that the impact of COVID in our operations was, I would say, minimal, because we managed to absorb much of the pressure by organizing very successful and very efficient activities such as the meet the buyer events and individual meetings in which SMEs had the opportunity to inform large buyers about their portfolio and their capacities. I think it was quite important that the presentation by Kaz Minerals also showcased how large and smaller companies can undertake measures to manage their risk for the personnel, for the operations, and for their financial status. We've looked into the achievements of the project, starting with the institutional support of gas industry to further develop the SDS in the long term, continue support to over 200 SMEs in 2 rounds of assessment, business reviews, various one-to-one trainings, development of a database of suppliers for the MNCs, transferring the international knowledge and experience from Serbia, Czech Republic, and other places to Kazakhstan, upgrading the connection with multinational companies and making transparent to MNCs what the capacities of SMEs are. Not to say the least, of course, the support towards the accreditation of SMEs and the financial incentive of providing 70% reimbursement for SMEs for their international certification course. We were very much pleased to hear the positive feedback of Antarium Group concerning working with the project and the insights they provide for the future. Kaz Industry comments concerning their continued support to SDS with a view to upgrading the status of SMEs internationally and providing more opportunities for them to develop added value programs. And of course, the key insights from key experts concerning how this situation can now actually accelerate changes in global value chains and actually force companies to increase competitiveness and invest in upgrading capacities, process, and personnel. And of course, we very much appreciate the comments and the feedback from World Bank, and of course the support for the implementation of the SME competitiveness project. We indeed feel that this has been an example and a showcase of how SMEs working in Kazakhstan, as well as supporting organizations such as Euroconsultants, who has been developing this project over the past 2 years, can be resilient, can be adaptive, and provide value-added services. So with that, I would like to thank you all again for your participation, and wish you a nice afternoon.
Thank you, Nikos. Thank you, colleagues. Dear participants, once again, allow me to thank you for the participation. Thanks to our speakers, the World Bank, the Ministry of National Economy, Industry and Infrastructure Development, Kazindustry, the Implementation Group. Thank you all once again. At that, our conference is drawn to a close. I wish you great success and all the best. Thank you very much.
Спасибо.
All the best to everyone.
Коллеги, всего хорошего.
Спасибо.
Спасибо. До свидания.